The air hangs thick and wet over the naval proving ground at Dahlgren, Virginia. It is June 1941. The humidity, rolling in from the tidal Potomac River, clings to the skin, a constant, oppressive presence that mirrors the atmosphere of global tension. Here, the war in Europe is a distant echo, a series of frantic radio dispatches and classified cables. For the men of the Bureau of Ordnance, the war is a theoretical problem, a series of equations governing shell velocity, armor plate resistance, and propellant burn rates. The loudest sound is not artillery, but the rhythmic whine of industrial lathes in the machine shops and the relentless drone of summer cicadas. The proving ground itself is a sprawling campus of concrete bunkers, meticulously cleared firing ranges that stretch for miles, and austere laboratories where the future of naval power is being quietly, methodically engineered. This is a place of precision, a world reduced to micrometers, tensile strength, and statistical deviations. Inside the dim, climate-controlled metallurgy lab, Commander Elias Thorne leans over a backlit inspection table. He is a tall, spare man, his naval uniform immaculate despite the oppressive heat. His focus is absolute, directed at a cross-section of American-made armor plate, a piece of steel destined for the belt of a new South Dakota-class battleship. He runs a gloved finger along a hairline fracture, a microscopic flaw invisible to the untrained eye. Beside him, a Rockwell hardness tester clicks methodically. Thorne dictates his observations to a junior ensign, his voice a low monotone that cuts through the hum of the ventilation. Sample 44B, failure at 90% of specified tensile strength. Grain structure appears. Brittle. Too much manganese in the alloy. He straightens up, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The problem is always the same: consistency. American industry, for all its might, struggles with the fine art of armor. It can produce steel in vast quantities, but the quality control, the precise balance of hardness and toughness, remains elusive. This is Thorne's world, a silent battle against material limitations. His days are a routine of failure analysis, chemical assays, and ballistic tests. He fires American 16-inch shells at American plates, dutifully recording the results. The reports are filed, sent to the Bureau of Ordnance in Washington, and the great machinery of naval construction grinds on. The news from the outside world, the Blitz, the U-boat menace, feels disconnected from this quiet, scientific pursuit. The dominant emotional state at Dahlgren is not fear, but professional frustration. They are building the most powerful navy in history, and Thorne is consumed by the nagging, persistent fear that its armor, its very skin, is flawed. In the corner of the lab, a teletype machine suddenly clatters to life, its keys striking the paper with an urgency that cuts through the routine. The ensign rips the sheet and glances at it, his face paling. "Commander!" It's a priority cable from the Admiralty. It's about the Hood. The news of the Hood's demise descends on Dahlgren like a physical shock, silencing the workshops and testing ranges. The teletype report is stark, stripped of emotion, but saturated with unbelievable fact. Sunk in the Denmark Strait. Engaged the German battleship Bismarck, a running gun battle at extreme range. Then, a single hit. A catastrophic magazine explosion. Gone in 3 minutes. 1,415 men, 3 survivors. The numbers are incomprehensible. The Hood, the very symbol of the Royal Navy's power, vaporized. In the officers' mess, men speak in hushed tones. They are engineers and ballisticians, and their minds immediately reject the headline, searching for the mechanical cause. A cordite fire, one officer suggests. A design flaw. Her deck armor was always too thin, a relic of her battlecruiser design. They nod, grasping for this rational explanation. It had to be a lucky shot, a one-in-a-million trajectory that found the single weak point. Commander Thorne, however, feels a cold dread that has little to do with luck. He locks himself in his office, pulling the blueprints for Hood. He cross-references them with the known specifications of the Bismarck's 38-centimeter guns. He plots the engagement ranges reported by the cruiser Suffolk. The ranges are extreme, over 26,000 yards at the moment of the kill. At that distance, naval doctrine is clear. The shells are descending in a high parabolic arc. This is plunging fire, a D. The shell should have struck the Hood's notoriously thin 3-inch deck armor. A penetration there, igniting the aft magazines, is plausible. It fits the accepted theory. But something about the Prince of Wales's after-action report, which arrives 2 days later, feels wrong. The Prince of Wales, itself brand new, was battered, its bridge struck, its systems failing. Its captain reports the Bismarck's gunnery was frighteningly accurate, the salvos grouped tightly. This wasn't a lucky shot, this was methodical destruction. A week later, a heavy wooden crate arrives at Dahlgren under armed Marine Guard. It is marked with British Admiralty seals and stenciled "Ordnance Sensitive via Reykjavik." Thorne and a small, cleared team pry it open in a secure bunker. Inside, packed in grease-soaked straw, rests a monster. It is an unexploded German 38-centimeter armor-piercing shell, a Panzergranate. It is sleek, painted black, and nearly 6 feet long. A dud recovered from an unflooded compartment aboard the Prince of Wales. It had punched through an unarmored superstructure section but failed to detonate. The men stand in silence, staring at the 764-pound piece of steel that had, in triplicate, just erased the most powerful ship in the British fleet. Thorne walks around it, his metallurgist's eye assessing its form. The craftsmanship is apparent, the machining is perfect, there are no visible flaws. He touches the pointed ballistic cap, then the hardened armor-piercing cap beneath it. This object does not feel like a product of mass production. It feels like a surgeon's tool. What he doesn't know, as he stands in the silence of the bunker, is that this shell holds a secret that will fundamentally change American naval engineering and the very doctrine of sea power. The problem, as defined by the Bureau of Ordnance in 1941, is one of simple physics. A naval gun is a calibrated instrument, its shell a known quantity, its target an armored box with known thicknesses. The variable is range. An official Buord memorandum dated March 1941 outlines the expected performance of the U.S. 16-inch 45 caliber gun. Against Class A cemented armor, penetration of the 16-inch belt is expected to be achieved at ranges up to 22 churn yards. Beyond 25 yards, the angle of fall becomes sufficiently acute. That deck penetration becomes the primary threat. This is the core of naval design. A ship has an immunity zone, a range band where it is theoretically safe, too far for enemy shells to pierce its thick sidebelt armor, and too close for those same shells to plunge through its thinner deck. The Hood, an older ship, had a dangerously small immunity zone. The Royal Navy knew this. The Germans knew this. The tragedy, therefore, was explained as a simple, predictable failure. The Bismarck fired from a range where its shells behaved like bombs, piercing the deck. The data from the Prince of Wales complicates this neat conclusion. The British ship, a new King George V class, had 15 inches of belt armour. It, too, was hit at ranges approaching 15 miles. A board analysis of the Prince of Wales's damage reports, intended to reassure the American naval staff, instead causes quiet alarm. Report A113 notes, multiple hits were sustained. Of note is a 38 centimeter projectile that struck the starboard side, below the bridge, and appears to have penetrated the 10.5-inch upper belt. This is dismissed by the report's author as an anomaly, likely striking a weakened plate joint or rivet. The consensus in Washington is that the Hood was a tragic but explainable loss. The German guns are good, their range-finding excellent, but they have not rewritten the laws of physics. The failed attempts to create a shell that is both hard enough to pierce armor and tough enough to not shatter on impact have plagued ordnance departments for decades. The British had their Green Boy shells that shattered. The Americans had early prototypes that proved too soft. The technical documentation paints a picture of a known world. Bismarck's 38 cm to SK-C-34 gun fires an 800-kilogram projectile at a high muzzle velocity of 820 meters per second. The British 15-inch Mark I, the Hood's main armament, fires a heavier 879-kilogram shell, but at a lower velocity. The German design prioritizes speed and a flat trajectory, ideal for penetrating vertical armor. The British design prioritizes weight, better for deck penetration at range. The battle was fought at the crossover point, where both trajectories were possible. But the British Admiralty's preliminary report, classified top secret, is riddled with a sense of shock that technical language cannot hide. The penetrating power of the German 38 cm shell appears to exceed all prior calculations. The Hood's magazines were detonated by a hit achieved at approximately 26 Caesar's yards. The rapidity of the loss suggests a deep, systemic penetration, not a simple cordite fire. The cold, hard data suggests one thing. The smoking wreck at the bottom of the Denmark Strait suggests another. The statistics are sterile. 1,415 men. The number is too large to comprehend. It is an abstraction, a data point in a war of escalating data points. But for the Royal Navy, it is a wound torn in the fabric of their world. It is 415 families who receive a telegram. It is the loss of generations of institutional knowledge, of fathers and sons, of seasoned captains and teenage midshipmen, all extinguished in 180 seconds. The human cost is measured in the cold North Atlantic water, in the clinging film of fuel oil that covers the surface, and in the 3 stunned survivors pulled from the wreckage, who can only repeat that the ship just vanished. The morale of the British home fleet is shaken to its core. If the Hood could be obliterated so easily, what ship is safe? The ocean, once a British highway, suddenly feels like a hostile alien wilderness. This human cost is linked directly to the technical impossibility. The engineers and scientists at Buord and the Admiralty are not unfeeling. They are haunted by the fact that their own calculations, their own meticulously crafted firing tables and armor penetration formulas had promised that this could not happen. The Hood's 12-inch main belt, Angled as it was, should have been able to defeat a 15-inch shell at that range. The German shell should have shattered on the face-hardened steel or glanced harmlessly off. The only explanation was the lucky deck shot. But Elias Thorne, staring at the captured shell in his Virginia lab, cannot accept it. He feels the weight of the 1-4-15 lives. He believes they were not killed by a fluke of statistics, but by a piece of superior engineering. He sees the problem not as a failure of the Hood, but as a terrifying success of the Bismarck. The emotional weight settles on the designers of the new American ships. The Iowa-class battleships are on the slipways. Their design, their armor, their lives are all based on the same set of proven equations that just failed in the North Atlantic. A sense of dread permeates the design committees. What if the calculations are wrong? What if the immunity zone is a myth? They are building billion-dollar ships that might be just as vulnerable as the Hood. They are sending thousands of men to sea protected by a theory that has just been violently disproven. The experts at the highest levels of the U.S. Navy are trapped. To admit the German shell is superior is to admit their new fleet is obsolete before it even sails. They must cling to the lucky shot theory. The consensus from the admirals is firm. It cannot be done. It is impossible. And therefore it did not happen. Elias Thorne is a product of two worlds. He was born in 1903, not near the sea, but in the smoky, industrial heart of America, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father was a senior foreman at the Carnegie Steel Works, a man who spoke of metallurgy not as a science, but as a craft, a feel for the metal. Young Elias grew up breathing the air thick with sulfur and iron oxide, watching 1,000-ton presses shape glowing ingots of steel. He learned the language of the forge, of tempering, quenching, and annealing. He understood that steel had a personality, that it could be coaxed into greatness or fail through impatience. While other boys played with wood, Elias built models from scrap metal, learning the hard lessons of brittle fractures and weak welds. This upbringing gave him an intuitive, almost tactile understanding of metal that set him apart from his peers. He did not go to Annapolis. His mind was too focused, too scientific. He attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, graduating top of his class in metallurgical engineering. His thesis, Stress Fractures in Face-Hardened Alloys, was a brilliant if obscure piece of work. The Navy, just beginning its interwar modernization, saw his potential and recruited him directly into the Bureau of Ordnance. Thorne was not a typical officer. He was quiet, introspective, and deeply uncomfortable with the Navy's rigid social hierarchies. He was a man of the laboratory, happiest with a microscope and a set of calipers. He respected the German industrial tradition, openly acknowledging in his reports that their work in optics, chemicals, and most worryingly, steel alloys was often superior to American efforts. This respect was not popular. Washington was focused on the arsenal of democracy, on the sheer, overwhelming quantity of production. Thorne was a lonely voice arguing for quality. He had seen tests of early American 16-inch shells that shattered against angled plate, a failure he traced back to flawed forging techniques. He was a perfectionist in an institution that was being forced to accept good enough. The news of the Hood did not just shock him as a naval officer, it offended him as a metallurgist. He could not accept the lucky shot theory because it felt like an intellectual retreat. He saw the recovered Bismarck shell not as a souvenir, but as a challenge, a message from his counterparts in Germany. He felt a strange professional kinship with the unknown engineers at Krupp who had designed it. They were speaking to him in the universal language of steel. The idea forms in Thorne's mind as he stands over the shell in the secure bunker. It is not an idea, but a suspicion, a whisper from his Pittsburgh childhood. The admirals see a lucky shot. The engineers see a deck penetration. Thorne sees a lie. He believes the shell did the impossible. He believes it went through the belt. And if it went through the belt, it means the shell itself is designed in a way that Allied science does not yet understand. He forms a crazy idea. The German shell is not a single piece of hard steel. It is a system. He suspects it is differentially hardened, a complex laminate of metals, an incredibly hard tip designed to break the armor's face, followed by a slightly softer, a tougher body to punch through the backing plate without shattering. This is a level of metallurgical sophistication that Buord had dismissed as impractical for mass production. Thorne drafts a memo requesting a full, destructive analysis of the shell. The response from his superior, a logistics-minded captain, is swift and dismissive. "Commander, that projectile is a unique intelligence asset. It is to be preserved for ballistic comparison, not dissected like a laboratory frog. Your time is to be focused on improving the test schedule for the 14-inch shell, not on this German anomaly." The subtext is clear. Stop chasing ghosts. The hood is a British problem, but Thorne cannot let it go. He sees the Iowa blueprints in his nightmares. Their magnificent armor belts rendered as thin as paper by this black shell. He approaches Dr. Aris Finch, the head civilian metallurgist at Dahlgren. Finch is a quiet, academic man, a former MIT classmate of Thorne's. He shares Thorne's frustration with Buord's bureaucracy. Thorne lays out his theory in Finch's cramped, book-filled office. "Aris, what if it's not homogeneous? What if the AP cap is one alloy, the nose is another, and the body a third?" Finch looks skeptical. "The forging process to achieve that, the quality control. It's not possible on this scale, Elias." Thorne taps the preliminary British report. 1,415 men say it is. He proposes they do it anyway, secretly. "We don't destroy it," Thorne says, his voice low. "We sample it. For hardness testing, non-invasive mostly, a core sample from the base maybe, a spectrographic analysis." Finch hesitates, seeing his career flash before his eyes. Then he nods. "We do it at night. We'll log it as calibration of spectrographic equipment. The setting for the test is the metallurgy lab, but at 2:00 a.m. the main lights are off, leaving only the focused, sterile glow of the instrument panels. The cicadas outside are a deafening wall of sound, a curtain for their clandestine work. The 764-pound shell lies horizontal on a heavy steel gurney, secured with canvas straps. It seems to dominate the room, a silent, menacing presence. Thorne and Finch move with the quiet intensity of surgeons. Their first task is the most dangerous, ensuring the fuse is inert. The shell is a dud, but that could mean the impact fuse failed, not that the charge itself is gone. Thorne, his hands surprisingly steady, examines the base fuse, the Bodensünder 38. It is a marvel of precision machining. He carefully removes the outer casing, his tools moving with millimeter precision until he can see the internal mechanism. It is intact, but the firing pin is jammed. Safe. They move to the shell's nose. Finch wheels over a heavy industrial drill press, its bit replaced with a diamond-tipped core sampler. This is the point of no return. "We'll take the first sample from the armor-piercing cap," Finch whispers, his voice tense. "If it's just standard face-hardened steel, we stop." Thorne nods, wiping sweat from his forehead. The humidity in the lab is thick, the air conditioning struggling against the load. Finch engages the drill. The sound is high-pitched, a piercing shriek that sets Thorne's teeth on edge, but it is quickly muffled by the heavy oil bath they've applied to the sample point. They work for an hour, the drill biting slowly, agonizingly, into the super-hardened steel. Finally, the core comes free, a small cylinder of metal, dark and gleaming. Finch mounts the sample and takes it to the Rockwell hardness tester. He applies the diamond indenter. The machine clicks. He checks the gauge, frowns, and recalibrates the machine. He tests it again. "Elias, this is off the charts. The hardness. It's harder than any tool steel we have. It's almost as hard as the diamond indenter itself." They move to the spectrograph, burning a tiny piece of the sample to analyze its chemical composition. The machine whirs and spits out a graph. Finch stares at it. High carbon, high chromium, but the trace is tungsten. And is that vanilla? Thorne looks closer. Vanillin. They sometimes use it as a chemical marker in the alloy mix. My God, Aris, the Germans. They aren't just forging, they are baking this steel. It's a chemical process. They realize the AP cap is designed to be as brittle and hard as glass. A sacrificial piece designed to shatter the outer layer of enemy armor. This is the first shock. The second comes when they sample the shell body itself, just behind the cap. The drill cuts through this metal much faster. The hardness tests come back completely different. "It's tough," Thorne says, his voice filled with a strange awe. "Incredibly ductile, high nickel, lower carbon." He holds the two samples side by side. It is not one shell. It is two different philosophies of steel fused into a single perfect weapon. The front is designed to break, the back is designed to endure. It is a punch that shatters the wall and a fist that carries through. But the final terrifying discovery is the fuse. They have fully disassembled it now. It is not a simple impact fuse. It is a complex clockwork delay fuse, made with the precision of a Swiss watch. "Look at this," Finch says, pointing to a tiny geared escapement. "This isn't an instantaneous fuse. This is designed to wait." Thorne does the math in his head. It waits. 0.35 seconds. It seems like nothing. Then he maps it to the velocity. At 500 meters per second, that's 58 feet. Under the shell is designed to punch through the outer belt, travel nearly 60 feet inside the ship, and then explode. It is designed specifically to find the magazines. "They knew," Thorne whispers. "They knew exactly what they were doing." If stories like this fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of wartime innovation might surprise you. The atmosphere in the Bureau of Ordnance conference room is thick with cigar smoke and skepticism. It is 3 days after the secret analysis. The room is paneled in dark wood, dominated by a heavy mahogany table around which sit the senior captains and rear admirals of the Ordnance Department. These are men who have spent their lives in service to naval doctrine, men who believe in the unassailable power of the 16-inch gun and the 16-inch armored belt. Commander Thorne and Dr. Finch stand at one end of the table, beside an easel holding microphotographs of steel grain and technical drawings of the German fuse. They look pale, exhausted, and hopelessly academic. Their initial report, filed under urgent metallurgical analysis, I had been met with such disbelief that they were summoned from Dahlgren to present in person. An admiral, his face a mask of bored impatience, taps his pen on the table. "Commander Thorn, your report is provocative. It asserts that the German 15-inch shell is not only superior to our own 16-inch projectile, but that it fundamentally defeats the armor principles upon which our new Iowa-class fleet is based. Is that a fair summary?" Thorn clears his throat, his voice steady despite the pressure. "Sir, our report does not state it is superior in all aspects. It states it is different. It is a specialized tool designed for a specific purpose: to defeat face-hardened belt armor at range and detonate within the ship's vitals." He gestures to the first photograph, a magnified image of the boundary layer between the AP cap and the shell body. "This is what we found. Not a single forged piece, but a composite. The Germans have solved the shatter problem. The cap is sacrificial. It cracks the enemy's hard face, and the main body, which is tougher and more ductile, punches through." A captain from the design bureau scoffs. "That's a theoretical advantage, Commander. In practice, the sheer kinetic energy of our two 700-pound Mark 8 shell makes such subtleties irrelevant." Thorn flips the chart to the diagram of the fuse. "With respect, Captain, this is the element that makes it relevant. This is the Bodensünder 38. We have analyzed its mechanism. It is a delayed action fuse, precise to 0.35 seconds. The room falls silent. The implications of that number hang in the air. 35 milliseconds, Thorn continues, is not an instantaneous explosion. It is a deliberate pause. It is the time required for the shell, after penetrating the main belt, to travel through the unarmored interior of the ship and reach the magazines or boiler rooms. The hood was not destroyed by a lucky deck shot. She was surgically killed by a shell that functioned exactly as its designers intended." The senior admiral leans forward, his voice a low growl. "And your proof?" Dr. Finch, speaking for the first time, steps forward. "The proof, Admiral, is in the metallurgy. Our shells, the Mark 8, are designed to be homogeneous. They are very hard, but they are also brittle when striking angled plate. The Germans have accepted a trade-off. Their shell is perhaps less effective against thin-skinned targets, but it is optimized to kill battleships." The Admiral stands, his anger radiating. "Commander, your discovery is based on one captured dud. One. And from it you are extrapolating a failure of our entire naval industrial complex. You are telling me that the ships we are building right now are coffin nails. Do you understand the implications of what you are saying?" Thorn meets his gaze. "Sir, I am telling you that our armor penetration models are based on the performance of our own shells, not the enemy's. And the enemy, it appears, is playing by a different set of rules. The 415 men on the hood are the proof. The confrontation ends with a cold, non-committal dismissal. Thorn and Finch are ordered back to Dahlgren, their report stamped top secret, analysis pending, and buried in a vault. The admirals cannot or will not accept the terrifying truth, but the report does not die. It is leaked quietly by a younger officer in the room to the design teams working on the Iowa class. The knowledge, now loose, cannot be contained. The real test of Thorn's discovery is not a single battle, but a frantic, behind-the-scenes race to adapt. The analysis of the Bismarck shell, though officially denied, triggers a shadow program. The Bureau of Ordnance, while publicly maintaining its stance, quietly issues new specifications. Project 10A is born, a crash program to improve the AP caps and, most critically, the fuses of the American 16-inch shell. The direct, tactical application of this knowledge comes 17 months later, in the black, chaotic waters of the South Pacific. It is the naval battle of Guadalcanal, November 14, 1942. The USS Washington, a North Carolina-class battleship, has intercepted the Japanese battleship Kirishima. The Washington, using its superior radar, opens fire at 400 yards. This is a brutal point-blank knife fight. The Washington's 16-inch guns are firing the new, improved Mark 8 AP shell. The design of its fuse, the Mark 21, is a direct descendant of the lessons learned from the Bismarck shell. It is a robust, delayed action fuse. The Washington pumps at least 9 16-inch shells into the Kirishima. The Japanese ship's log, recovered later, tells the story. The shells do not explode on the outer hull. They punch through the armor, penetrating deep into the ship's vitals before detonating. The Kirishima is ripped apart from the inside. Her steering is destroyed. Her turrets are silenced. Massive fires are started in her superstructure and, critically, below her waterline. The shells function exactly as Thorn had predicted the German shells would. They pierce, they travel, they explode. The Kirishima, a blazing wreck, is scuttled by her crew hours later. The Washington is barely scratched. The victory is a stunning validation of American gunnery, but it is a secret victory for the metallurgists at Dahlgren. Thorn, reading the after-action report, feels no triumph, only a quiet, grim confirmation. The test was a success. The knowledge had been paid for by the Hood, but it had just saved the Washington. A short coded telex arrives from Buord a week later. It reads only, Project 10A validated. Proceed with Mark 22 upgrade. It is the only recognition he will ever receive. The immediate consequence of Thorn's analysis is a seismic, though deeply classified shift in Allied ordnance philosophy. The American 16-inch Mark 8 shell, which had been a solid, reliable but uninspired projectile, is radically redesigned. The metallurgical lessons from the German shell are reverse-engineered. American foundries in Pennsylvania, under new exacting Buord contracts, begin experimenting with capped projectiles, creating an AP cap, the Mark 13, that is specifically designed to shatter the hard face of enemy armor, clearing the way for the main, toughened penetrator body. But the most significant change is the fuse. The new Mark 21 and 22 fuse are built with precisely calculated delays, not the 0.035-second delay of the German shell, but a slightly shorter 0.033-second delay, optimized for the higher velocity of the American 16-inch gun. This ensures that the two 700-pound shell detonates after penetrating the main armor belt, turning enemy capital ships into contained pressure cookers of shrapnel and blast. In the long term, the Bismarck shell analysis marks the beginning of the end for the heavily armored battleship. Thorn's findings proved a terrible new equation. Offensive gunnery technology had definitively and permanently outpaced defensive armor technology. If a shell could be designed to be smart enough to pierce any practical thickness of steel, Then, any practical thickness of steel was no longer a viable defense. The massive 16-inch belts of the Iowa and Yamato-class ships were, in essence, a colossal, multi-thousand-ton illusion of safety. The Hood's death and the analysis of the shell that killed her proved that the new currency of naval warfare was not armor, but information, the ability to strike first from farther away. The future belonged to the radar-guided gunnery of the Washington, and ultimately to the aircraft carrier, which removed the battleship from the equation entirely. Elias Thorne's later life is a quiet study in professional humility. He is promoted to captain, but his contribution remains buried under layers of classification. He is not a man for parades or public accolades. He finishes the war at his desk at Dahlgren, analyzing new threats: German guided missiles, Japanese rocket planes. After the war, he becomes a senior civilian administrator at the newly formed Naval Surface Warfare Center, ironically presiding over the decommissioning of the very battleships his work had helped make both lethally effective and strategically obsolete. He retires to a small house on the Chesapeake Bay, spending his days studying the microstructures of oyster shells, a metallurgist to the very end. His name is never associated with the great naval victories of the Pacific. He is a ghost in the machine, his legacy living not in headlines, but in the alloy composition of shells that now sit as silent monuments in front of VFW halls. We now understand that the greatest revolutions in warfare are often microscopic. The fate of empires, the lives of thousands, can hinge on the precise grain structure of a piece of steel or the delay of a single tiny gear in a fuse. The Bismarck shell was not just a weapon, it was a piece of predictive science. It was an argument written in high-tensile steel that the age of the armored knight was over and the age of the precise, penetrating scalpel had begun. That single, captured projectile, dissected in the humid Virginia night, was a whisper from the future. It told a story of a new kind of war, where victory would be decided not by the thickest armor but by the sharpest point. It was a lesson that cost 415 men, and one that the American Navy, in secret, learned just in time. Today, the principles of the Bismarck shell are alive and well. They exist in the tandem charge warheads of modern anti-tank missiles, which use a small sacrificial charge to defeat reactive armor before the main charge penetrates the hull. They exist in the kinetic energy long-rod penetrators fired by Abrams tanks, which are simply the logical hypervelocity evolution of the same hard-nosed, tough-body philosophy. The lessons of that 1941 analysis extend even into non-military fields. In disaster response, we design bunker-buster water drills to penetrate collapsed concrete. In space exploration, we design micrometeorite shields for spacecraft based on the same sacrificial layer principle. The arms race never truly ends. It just moves to a smaller and smaller scale. The true insight from Dahlgren is that impossibility is often just a failure of imagination or a flaw in our assumptions. The admirals believed a belt penetration at 15 miles was impossible because their shells couldn't do it. They had failed to account for an enemy who had solved a problem they themselves had abandoned. The universe is not bound by our own limitations. The silent, hulking battleships that now serve as museums, like the USS Massachusetts or the Wisconsin, are testaments to this hidden war. Their great 16-inch guns, which fired shells improved by Thorne's analysis, now aim harmlessly at the sky. They are silent witnesses to a revolution that began not in a thunderous salvo, but in the quiet click of a hardness tester and the terrifying perfection of a 0.035-second delay. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?